Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. Now, for those of you that are watching the video version of this, you'll notice there's something very different, and it's perfectly timed for this episode. I'm actually filming this episode in some friends of mine house, upstairs in their 16-year-old daughter's room. So there's stuff in around here. They've been very kind to let me work out of here for the week because we've got a bunch of renovations happening in our house. Particularly, we're having the floors sanded. So one, the noise is pretty horrific, and two, I went there this morning and the smell is pretty bad too. Now, in today's episode, we're going to talk about moving from being a consumer to a creator. Now, many of us get stuck in this cycle of consuming content, of learning, and we never get into it. Now, there are lots of barriers that get in the way of those. Perfectionism, needing things to be right. We'll dive into each of those. But today's episode, I had to literally take some of my own medicine because my setup here is very different. I don't have my normal camera. I don't have my normal environment. I don't have all my normal equipment. And I wanted it to be fantastic for you. And then I had to stop and have a smile and realize that this is really quite meta with what I'm talking to you about. The idea is to get it done. And today I'm going to help you. We're going to talk about what are the barriers that get in the way of us becoming a creator. Why is it important for us to become a creator? We'll have a bunch of action steps along the way as well. So let's differentiate a little bit. What is a consumer versus a creator? Well, consumers are passive recipients of information and services. They often get stuck in the cycle of consuming without implementing, okay? When we're consuming, we are reactive rather than being proactive. We're reading book after book, taking course after course. It's a very passive approach. Now, when we compare that to what life is like as a creator, we're an active participant in our own success. We're not just absorbing information, but we're applying it. We're proactive and we're innovative. Now, again, I want to touch on a couple of things here as well, because we have to have phases of being consumers. So most of you that are listening to this are chiropractors. The stage that we go through university is very much a consumption phase. There is some application that we do there, but we're learning, okay? But if we never got out of university, if we never actually started to apply the information, then it's a heck of a waste of a lot of time as well. Being a consumer is really like being the passenger in a car, while being a creator is being in the driving seat, okay? Steering wheel in hand, GPS set to whatever the destination is that you want. So consumption is necessary, okay? And we want to have elements of consumption. It's just that when our life is overtaken by consumption and not creation, there's some real impacts of that as well. When we move our life to being more of a creator rather than a consumer, we take ownership and control. As I mentioned before, we're in the driver's seat there too. Shifting towards a creator may well be one of the more profound things that you do to increase revenue of your practice. When you create, you add value and people will pay you for that. Now, whether it be solving people's problems online, whether it be community talks, whatever it is that you're creating content and building value in your community so more people know you, like you, and trust you, it will end up in the bottom line of your practice. When you become a creator, there is an element of personal and professional growth that's needed. So the very act of creating will challenge you, not only to learn, but to move beyond learning as well. And so you really get to enjoy an enormous amount of growth and adaptation. Community impact. This is a big thing, okay? There are many things. We'll talk about what holds us back from becoming a creator as well. But community impact is one of the great benefits. As a creator, you have the power to influence and inspire lots of people, thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands of people. And so if there's something inside of your heart that says, I want to get this chiropractic message out to more people, I want to change more lives, then becoming a creator is one of the essential skills that you can develop, okay? It is a skill set that is transcendent. In fact, becoming a creator, one of the ways that I want you to see yourself is as a problem solver. When you see yourself as a problem solver, what you're actually doing is you're creating solutions. And the more you solve problems and the bigger problems you solve and the more problems that you solve, the more community impact that you have. Shifting into being a creator also has, and what comes with it, is a tremendous amount of job satisfaction, okay? It adds layers of enjoyment on top of the beautiful work that we do with our patients because of all the reasons that I talked about before. Now, I'm not immune to this. I've had several stages throughout my life where I have been stuck in the consumption cycle around again and again. And really it got to the stage for me that I had to move. In fact, I was in one just before starting this episode where I was trying to make it perfect. I was looking for information where I could get this environment, that environment, all those things there too. I wanted to get another camera working. That couldn't work. I was consuming content online. When it came to the point for me where I said enough is enough, okay? I'm not trying to create an Academy Award-winning movie here. This is not a professionally produced television show or podcast either for that matter, but I've got a message that I damn well wanted to share with you, and that's what really drove me out of it as well. It's important to understand that this consumption cycle that we get into for many of us is very much hardwired, okay? It's a dopamine cycle that we're in here. Dopamine, the feel-good hormone, the neurotransmitter, it's the one that really rewards us for consumption, particularly when we feel like because what we get tricked into consuming and thinking that this is taking us towards the goal that we want to have, which is a busier, more impactful practice, learning how to create content, whatever it is there too. And so dopamine is releasing, we feel really good about it, and we're tricked into thinking that we're actually moving closer, but we're not, all right? This is this cycle that just continues unless, of course, we move towards implementation. Now, understanding too is on top of our brain being hardwired to just consume things, is that it's literally $1 billion trap. You know, the biggest social media companies as well as the biggest marketing agencies on the world are investing billions of dollars in advertising, in layouts of their platforms to make sure that we get stuck in the cycle of consumption. Because when we're stuck in the cycle of consumption, they can show more ads, it brings in more revenue, and so the marketers and the social media platforms themselves. So we need to understand to some extent what we're doing is our brains, which are addicted to it, we're popping that drug in front of it. So understand that there's a lot that's working against you. And so to some extent, I want to tell you it's not all your fault, although we are in control of our lives, but understand what's kind of working against us as well. It's worth knowing that next time you find yourself kind of scrolling on the social media platforms, that there's a team of neuroscientists and marketers there as well, literally high-fiving themselves and each other because you're helping to bring in billions of dollars for them. So understand there are people working against you wanting to become a creator. Now, there are many challenges. Let's talk about some of the challenges that we have to overcome to move from. One of them is just getting out of that dopamine cycle I talked about beforehand, if we want to move from a consumer to a creator. The first one, and we've talked about this a lot, but I want to give you some different angles, is this idea there is a fear of failure. So when we're in there learning and we want to start to implement, what goes on inside of our mind is, what if I fail at this? What if I suck? What if I'm not good at it as well? Now, I want to be really open and honest here for you, because for many of you, a couple of weeks ago, I was teaching a class for community influencer members, and I was showing them how to take case studies and turn them into really great video content. I've got a great formula that I take them step by step, answer these 8 questions, and that's your video that's done for you. And even though this is as blueprint as I can make it there too, I finished off by saying, when you do this, you will suck. And then eventually you'll suck less, and then you will eventually get good at this. But this is the learning cycle we have to know and realize, is that whenever we're doing anything new, the cycle pretty much is you'll suck to begin with. After a little while, you'll suck less, and then eventually you'll get good at it. And if you stick at it long enough, you'll become world class. But there is often pain, and there is often failure, and there is often rejection, okay? I want to be clear about that, because I don't want to sell you into something that is an unreasonable expectation. However, there's pain there for you already. And the pain is you're experiencing the pain of inactivity. And so really what we get to do is we get to choose our pain. We get to choose the pain of failure, of some of the rejection, of having to learn something, or we get the pain of our inactivity, which ultimately in many cases leads to regret and then sometimes even resent. Now, one of the driving forces for me is I often go back to Teddy Roosevelt's quote on the man in the arena. I've read this out beforehand, but I want to read it to you again, because this is a very strong drive for me in what helps me to move from consumer into creator. Here's what Teddy Roosevelt says. He says, "It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who was actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy course, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst knows if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. One of the great regrets of those people on their deathbed is they wish they had have tried more. They wish they had to put themselves out there more. And I think about that end thing. If we fail, at least we'll fail while daring greatly, and we'll know that our place will never be with those cold and timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. Defeat is part of life, but you cannot have victory if you're not prepared to do that. We must get on the arena. Sitting back and watching other people and comparing ourselves to other people is not in the arena. And those people who might throw stones at us, and it's very, very few, if any, are those people in the stands. And we never, ever listen to the people in the stands. And so if you're feeling scared of failure or rejection, no, that's part of the plan. Okay, this is part of what happens, and you get to choose your pain. Do I want the pain that comes along with that, or do I want the pain of regret as well? The second challenge that happens with many of us when we want to move from consumer to creator is the overwhelm, because you're sitting there thinking now, what camera do I use? What microphone do I use? How do I go about creating the video? What's in my script? Which platform should I be on? How long is the video? How do I go about editing my video? All these things are racing through your mind, and they very, very quickly get to overwhelm. And so overwhelm is often a barrier. However, what I've learned in the last few years is overwhelm is often not what you think it is. And overwhelm is often an excuse that we use. It's a socially acceptable excuse, because what we're really thinking is we just don't want to fail. So instead of saying, Angus, I'm scared of fail, which we talked about before, I'm scared of failure, I'm scared of rejection, I'm scared of nobody watching my videos, the more socially acceptable thing to you to say to me and your peers and your practice members is, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know where to start. So most cases, what I want you to check in with yourself, am I really overwhelmed, or is it that I just am scared of there being failure? So that's it for many of it. Now, in the case that you are truly overwhelmed, then what I want you to know is that this is not about having to know all of the pieces, and you don't need to know them all right away. One of my favorite metaphors is to think is that we can drive from one side of the country to the other in the dark as long as our headlights shine the 100 or 200 meters in front. We just need to know what is the first step. Now, again, you might be saying, I don't know the first step. Well, what you do is you take a step, any step to begin with. And we can look at this as many different ways. If we're trying to get rid of debt that we've built up over time, then some people say, start with the smallest, the easiest step. What could be the easiest step? What is it? Okay. Get your phone out, put it in front of you, share a message, add value, solve a problem. Okay. Was there an interesting question that you got asked in practice today? Could you just share that? Now, if you put it up there and nobody watches it, that's okay. Let's get our first bad video out of the way. But if we're to get over overwhelm, we have to first identify, is it really overwhelm? Or, as I said before, is it actually fear? Now, some other things to think about as well is to think about what's often the fail fast philosophy. And this is the quicker that you fail, the quicker you learn what doesn't work. And this brings you a step closer to what actually does. We don't actually have to know all of we're obsessed with wanting to know all of the pieces. And again, let's go back to chiropractic college as an example. They don't tell us all the things that we need to know in fifth year. Let's trust the process. Go through first year, then second, and then we work our way through it too. Another great thing to think about is the 2-minute rule, okay? This can help you sort of break some of the inertia of not knowing where to start. If the task can take less than 2 minutes, then do it immediately, okay? If there's something you can do in 2 minutes, get to it, pull that camera up, shoot that short video, or head over to Canva, create that post. A small win can often be a catalyst that can help you move forward. So when there truly are a lot of steps, then just start with the smallest one, plan out your time, and sometimes it's about changing the time frame. If your goal is to position your practice as a thought leader, or maybe the thought leader in your community, and you've got in the back of your mind that you want this done in the last or the next 6 months, that can be overwhelming. It's a lot to do in that time frame. And depending on where you're starting from, that's not something that I would encourage you to be thinking about. However, if we shifted that time frame out to 3 years, it takes a lot of pressure off, and it's a more reasonable time frame for you to have a big lofty goal like that. We feel overwhelmed many times because we compress the time too much. We need to be starting to think about longer time frames. One of the other challenges that has us stuck in the consumption cycle there too is a lack of skills. That's why we're there going to learn as well. So we're wanting to learn more and more and more. We're looking to upskill ourselves. Now, this is tricky because it's necessary. All right, if we're going to be doing something new, we have to get the skills to begin with. But as I started off thinking about and sharing inside of this, the goal that you want to be thinking about here is B- work. And most of us are trying to shoot for A+ work from the beginning. B- work will help you change and save thousands of lives. It'll increase the income that you have in your practice, the impact because of the lives that you change, and the enjoyment. Now, you have to push off that idea of perfectionism because that perfectionism is really all about fear of failure. So much of this comes back to fear of failure. But lack of skills, our goal is B- work there too. Now, you might want to think about setting a learning to action ratio. So encouraged to adopt maybe a 1-to-1. So if it's 1 hour of learning, it's 1 hour of implementing. That's a great spot to start with. And this is just implementing little things there too. Time box your learning. So you could allocate specific time spots for learning new skills, but make sure that you also allocate those same time to applying those skills. This prevents just one more course syndrome, all right? So we time box. Implementation there, that needs to match our learning time. Implement as you go. We don't need to wait to the very end of the course, the very end of, you don't have to listen to all of my podcasts, but from today, there's enough to get you started there. Having an accountability partner, so pair up with somebody who can hold you accountable for taking action. Share your goals and check in regularly to ensure that you're moving from consuming to creating. It's important that you celebrate small wins. So when you do start with your first bit of B- work, make sure you celebrate that. Share that with somebody that's important to you. Every piece of B- work is a step towards mastery. Celebrate it. This will positively reinforce you and have you be more inclined to take further action. I like the concept of the 2-day rule as well. So never let more than 2 days go by without applying something that you've learned, including this podcast. This keeps the momentum going and it solidifies your learning through practical application, okay? One of the other big challenges that gets in the way of us moving from consuming to creating is just time constraints, okay? Now, we know we've got a lot to learn. We know we've got a lot to do, and most of us are busy, and we'd rather be spending time adjusting our patience with our family and our hobbies than marketing our practice and reaching out. So I get the time thing as well. Now, whenever I think about the time issue or am I feeling time poor, I often think back to a prime minister that we had here. It was probably about 8 or 10 years ago, a guy by the name of John Howard. Many Aussies will remember him as well. Now, John Howard always got up every morning and went for a 1-hour walk. Now, I know that our prime ministers, the leaders of our countries, are incredibly busy. It's not a 9-to-5 job and it's not a 5 days a week job. It's literally around the clock, 7 days a week. Yet he had time every day to get up and go for an hour walk, not 10 minutes walk, not 20 minutes. He walked for an hour every day. He had his security guards and everyone around him and he wore these really daggy tracksuits, but he got up and he did that. And it was a reminder for me, if he's got time to do that for an hour a day, it's what helps me continue on with my exercising. But it reminds me that I have time also. We all have the same time, okay? There's nobody that has more than 24 hours. The question is not about how much time we have, it's how we're using it. And it may well be we need to ask ourselves the question of priority. What is more important for you? Okay, now, sometimes, depending on what the project is, sometimes I exercise a little less because what's important for me at the moment is my business goals. And I could be incredibly healthy, but if my business isn't working great, then that's a stress on me and not good for my health either. So I have to prioritize these things. This morning, Lauren said to me, do you want to come for a walk along the beach with Sonny and I? Now, that sounded like a really great thing for me to do, and I would have loved to have done it, but I had other things that I was committed to. And I could have had that walk on the beach, but then the rest of the day would have been thrown out. I couldn't be present for them tonight. So we have to be constantly prioritizing your life. You get to decide what is important for you as well. So make time for cutting out what is less valuable and putting things in that are more valuable. Now, that being said, maybe it's just an hour that you find. Maybe it's you getting up an hour earlier in the morning, one time a week, or less television, less social media. Maybe it's an hour. Don't underestimate what you can do with one focused hour a week. That's 52 hours over the year. And if you invested 52 hours into really specifically focusing on improving the impact, the income, and the enjoyment that you have in practice, that will repay enormous dividends, right? Don't underestimate the power of 1 hour there as well. So let's wind all of this up. We've covered some pretty serious ground today. We've dissected the difference between being a consumer and a creator. We've talked about the benefits of stepping into a creator, more control, more revenue, more impact, and don't forget, more satisfaction as well. There's a great deal of enjoyment that comes with being a creator. We talked about the neuroscience behind consumption and how our brains are wired for those dopamine hits, and we have literally billion-dollar industries that are trying to keep us inside of that cycle, okay? We've unmasked some of the challenges that get in the way from us being stuck inside of overwhelm, fear of failure there too, not enough time, not knowing where to start. There are all these barriers of which we've gone through and talked about what are the steps that we can start with, okay? So what's next? Well, what is next is it's time to start to take some action. Remember, the world doesn't reward you for what you know. It rewards you for what you do. In fact, one of my more favorite sayings of recent there too, to know and not do is not to know, okay? So it's implementation. So start small, break things down, and for heaven's sake, do not let perfectionism have you stuck on the sideline as well. Aim for that B- work, because B- work will help you change the world, okay? Unfinished work cannot, okay? And if you catch yourself saying, I'm overwhelmed, take a moment, check in. Am I overwhelmed, or am I afraid of something? More often than not, you will find that it's fear that's getting in the way as well. So folks, that's it for today's episode. If you've found some value in this, please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and maybe share this with a partner, a loved one, a friend maybe who needs to take some action, and please share it with your chiropractic buddies as well. The more chiropractors that we have out there creating in this world, the better it is for chiropractic, the better it is for our communities as well. As always, folks, thank you for all that you do and the lives that you save. Your community needs you desperately to shift more into creator as well. All right, folks, see you back here next week. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.